Hello, and welcome to the How to Exit podcast, where we introduce you to a world of small to medium business acquisitions and mergers. We interview business owners, industry leaders, authors, mentors, and other influencers with the sole intent to share with you what it looks like to buy or sell a business. Let's get rolling. But thank you for being here, and let's start with the origin side of it.
Yes. So actually, my path to becoming an acquisition entrepreneur is probably an odd one, but then we all have odd paths. I was just talking with Ron, and I was born into a cult family in London, and my father was in a cult called the School of Economic Science, and it was from before I was born until the day he died, which is a couple of years ago. So that was a very strange upbringing, and we were we were vegetarian, and we played in Sanskrit, and the women all had to be subservient to their men, and all those other things that cults do. They then opened up their own schools, to which I was sent, and they decided to beat the boys a lot to break us into submission. And the girls they didn't beat because, of course, they were female, and you couldn't do that to a woman. They just put them into arranged marriages with their teachers. But all the cult stuff went on. I was very grateful to escape around the age of 12.
Oh, wow. So that's a tough start, right? So 12, you escape. Where do you go live with a relative? Where did you go to finish school and to end up where you are now?
I went to normal school, and my mother actually, she kind of had enough. I think she got married not really knowing what she was getting into. And eventually they got divorced, and we were running away from school every single day. And of course, my father's people were telling the judges that we loved it there and we were happy there. But the judge could see that we just left every single day. So we were able to give evidence in our own way. And we got out. So I went to normal schooling. Oh, we still, of course, had, normal family. We had, didn't lose touch with uncles and aunts and grandparents and neighbors. So there was a semblance of normality in our life as well. So we knew what that was. Because, of course, when you start approaching businesses, don't you say, I'd be interested in buying you. You really don't know what to say. You can say, I'd be interested in buying you. And they give whatever response they're going to give. And you don't really know what to say next.
Right.
So that's why those conversations are so useful, because it becomes a natural thing to talk about.
Yeah, it's like if you try that approach, a lot of times people don't get, well, I'm not for sale. It's like, okay, if you go in the natural approach, and what we did in the 100-day challenge was just to go, tell me all about your business. How did you build it? Why did you build it? What were your challenges? I bet this was difficult. I bet that was easy, or whatever. And you're having a natural conversation, and somewhere along the lines, like, what's next? Right? What are you going to do when this is done? Right? And that's naturally part of the conversation, as opposed to just going, hey, I buy businesses. Are you for sale? So it doesn't land right, because nobody's for sale unless there's like something's wrong, unless they've already reached out to a broker, right? Most businesses you want, they're not necessarily for sale.
Normally, by the time they think it's for sale, it's actually far too late to get it into any conditions. The vast majority, I think, never, the famous statistic says that the vast majority never sell. And those that they decide to sell, and then they've got, another 3 or 4 years to get it into shape, even if they know how. They could easily have been preparing that earlier, doing the right things, so that when they finally want to step away, everything's in place. But the majority don't do that. Motorcycling hasn't been in growth for the last few years. It's kind of, an older population. So you look at it and you think, well, it's not the sort of thing I'm going to buy into. Everyone wants to buy into tech. We all want to buy AI, e-commerce, SaaS. But it's a very different space, isn't it? Because, of course, everyone's investing in that. And you get venture capitalists going in there, putting in millions of pounds into businesses, 9 of 10 of which fail. And it's the massive gamble says that one of these is going to become Facebook. So that's not a practical approach for someone like me or most of us, is it? You want to find a viable business that you can get involved in and make a living from while you're growing it. Mm-hmm. So that space becomes very hard. So I looked around for e-commerce and looked at some other sectors and started actually working on building up a marketing group of marketing agencies with some other people. And that's beginning to go, though I haven't got my own one yet, but I'm collaborating quite closely with them, and that's starting to come together. But it made sense to me to talk to motorcycling businesses, and I spoke to some owners. And of course, middle of last year, I was speaking to an owner. I dropped him a little message, and the message, got like a one-liner back saying, yes, I would like to sell my business.
Okay.
So we got talking, and so the story began, the long journey of discussions and negotiations until that finally came to pass.
You mentioned in your notes it's a turnaround. So is it not as profitable as it can be? Was it losing money? Where was it when you first seen it?
When I spoke to them, they'd lost some money. The owner had been not involved for a while. He'd had someone running it, and they clearly communications hadn't been quite right. He'd had some personal problems. I think his mother had died, and when he got back involved, there were some quite big losses, and there was a falling out with the person that'd been running it. And technology had obviously moved on and was leaving them behind a bit. So he was in a difficult place, and hence, he was highly motivated to find a way out. So it was hard for us because one of the things they'd had was big problems with systems. So you start asking for what's your numbers, and it was really hard for them to tell us in any reliable way. For a couple of years, they've been running 2 or 3 different finance systems alongside and not trusting any of them, and they'd all been costing money. So one of the things he'd done is gone down to one system, but that wasn't great. And just getting good financial information was one of the challenges, of many, I should say. I didn't talk about this much yet, but while I was on the journey, towards this, I ended up partnering up with Rob Richmond and his synergy groups, which means that we've got a whole structure here now for building groups of companies and some really, really good people involved. So when I started talking to this company, I needed to bring different people in, and I needed to understand the potential deal better, and I brought in Rob. And the financials needed to be picked apart. I brought in Steve Rumsey's another, a great CFO. And I brought the systems had all sorts of problems. And I brought in Rick Wilson, who's another one of the team. And finally, we needed to buy a property, and we brought in a property guy that was able to unlock that part of the deal. And so I ended up building a team of 5. So now between that and the Synergy Group's concept, we have a really strong platform that we can build things on. So we can acquire other companies, and we have one that's just about to be announced that's been worked on in a very closely related space. And we have opportunities in the whole of not just motorcycling, but anything around e-commerce or related engineering disciplines, let me say that again, around automotive and motorcycling and related engineering disciplines, or entirely separately around e-commerce and logistics, because, that's half of our business. So we have opportunities to synergistically acquire companies in both directions. So we're looking at both at the moment. Odd story, I took some of the guys in the business to a race recently, and I hadn't been to one for a while. And it turned out unfortunate with a quite a bad accident. But when we got there, I said, we have to go to this place on the circuit. And it was actually the place where I had my last racing crash. So I knew the circuit really well. It's a beautiful circuit in England. In fact, the Americans used to come over and do the transatlantic trophy on it every Easter. It was great racing. But they would go over this hill called Clay Hill, pulling massive wheelies on those screaming race bikes in the 70s. I said, we got to go and look at that. We got to the hill. Not a single wheelie was being pulled. They all had that front wheel flat on the ground. Absolutely ruined it. The spectacle is gone.
So you're going to buy other stuff. You're going to acquire things. You're going to make this, kind of a roll up or something, with the intent at some point to build it as if it, to exit, to build it to where it can be sold. That's when wealth generation really happens in this space. You make a living. You make yourself be able to pay your bills and eat when you run it. You make generational wealth when you sell it, and you do that on multiple occasions. What's the horizon you see here? You think this is going to be 2 years, 3 years, 5 years?
Certainly in that range, yes.
Yeah.
And with work going on the marketing group as well. And there's a group also of ERP companies coming together nicely now, and some in kind of solar. So there's some really interesting groups of companies coming out of our group, all of which will have, the way it works, obviously, but it's worth telling people, isn't it? If you look at any one of these companies, and you try and sell it when you want to retire, if you're lucky, you may get 2, 3, or maybe even 4 times its EBIT as its sale price. There's always, it's seductive, I think, for a business owner, isn't it? The particularly small business owner think they're going to sell it like they sold their house. And, they're just going to decide to sell it one day, give it to an agent. Someone's going to give them $1 million, and they're going to go off and spend the rest of their days on a boat. Of course, in reality, that doesn't happen, does it? A business sale is more complex because a business can so easily fail having been sold. So people will very rarely give you the money up front. You get into complex deals, you get into deferred payments, you get into all sorts of interesting arrangements, which can give the owner the value they want in the long term, but not expose the buyer to risk. But what happens is that the business owner's not really interested in that. So I just want my money. Don't do all this fancy stuff. So if PE comes along and says, hey, we'll just give you the money, they're going to jump at it, aren't they? And
Yeah.
the future be damned. However that business is going to get milked and destroyed is no longer my problem because I've got my million and I'm on my boat.
There'll be some people like that. There's always those people. And I've seen more often than not here, I've seen small, especially the small to medium businesses, the legacy and the legit, it's basically a safe pair of hands for the business often becomes probably, 2 or 3 times, 50, 60, 70% of the time is more interesting and more important to that owner than the actual monetary values. After interviewing 300 people, I've actually asked many times who was the highest bidder, the one that got the company. And there's like not normally. It's the one that the owner felt safest. Usually the bids are pretty close, they would say, within a few $100,000, within $100,000 or $200,000 of each other. But it wasn't the highest and best. They got the offer. It was the ones that the owner trusted the most, the one that the owner believed that would take care of the best care of their customers and employees. Are you participating in some of the other, like the marketing thing? Are you going to be a part owner of some of the marketing things if you go through that route? Or
Yeah.
okay.
I have my own digital marketing agency. It makes sense for me to do that.
Right.
And the weird thing is, isn't it? We have a business which is 50% e-commerce. It's almost a marketing company. So sometimes you wonder which side of the fence it should go. Should it be a marketing company or should it be an automotive company? So it's an interesting space because there's a lot of technology in both areas, and some of it is integrated between the marketing and the automotive side.
Almost all businesses should be a marketing and sales company, and the product is, in your case, is a motorcycle. The product in another case might be, I'm writing a software app, and product are there. I should be a marketing and sales agency. The product is an app, right? It could be almost any business that they're really focused on how do I run the business is the business. The product, whether it's cars or motorcycles or widgets, you know, that's definitely a part of it. But, you can make the best widget in the world, and if you can't market it and sell it, you can't drive numbers. Nobody's going to know, and you're not going to pay your next, you're not going to keep the lights on.